My husband cheated on me. The first time I met Clara, I thought she was a ray of sunshine, a blindingly bright one. My husband, Ben, had been singing her praises for weeks, this new marketing whiz-kid at his firm. I was prepared to be jealous, maybe a little threatened, but when she walked into the pub that evening, a whirlwind of curly red hair and infectious laughter, I was simply charmed. It was a double date, Clara and her then-boyfriend, Liam, who was a quiet, almost mousy fellow. Ben and I had been looking forward to it, eager to get to know these new work acquaintances. Conversation flowed easily. Clara was dynamic, engaging, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. She told stories with dramatic flair, her eyes sparkling, and had this way of leaning in that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We even bonded over a shared love of cheesy 80s movies. Liam mostly nodded along, occasionally adding a soft-spoken comment. I remember thinking, she's wonderful. Ben was right. It was a pleasant evening, filled with easy banter and the promise of good friendships to come. Little did I know, that night was the calm before the storm, the gentle breeze before the hurricane. I'd always been secure in my relationship with Ben. We were each other's anchors, comfortable in our routines and traditions. We communicated well, we laughed often, and we were, I thought, in tune with each other's needs. But, looking back, maybe I was too complacent, too confident in the solidity of our foundations. The change was subtle at first. Ben started staying later at the office, bringing home work he needed to finish. He mentioned Clara's name more often, her ideas, her insights, her jokes. I tried to be understanding, knowing the pressure he was under with the recent quarterly deadlines. I even found myself asking about her, fueled by a mixture of curiosity and a strange, unsettling feeling. Then came the day Ben forgot our anniversary. He'd never forgotten before. It wasn't just the forgotten dinner reservation, or the lack of flowers, it was the look on his face when I reminded him, a look of distracted guilt and, dare I say, a flicker of something else. It was the same look he had when he confessed he'd been meeting Clara for work discussions late at night. My carefully constructed world started to crumble, the soft edges fraying into jagged ones. I felt it then, deep down in my gut, the truth I'd been denying for weeks. It wasn't just work discussions. It was the same electric pull I'd seen in Clara when we'd first met, the gravitational force that drew people to her. It was the same thing Ben had fallen victim to, it seems. The confrontation was inevitable. We sat in silence for a long time after I'd stated the obvious. He didn't deny it. Instead, he spoke of being inspired, of feeling alive again. He used words that felt like knives, twisting in my heart. He talked about finding something he didn't even realize he'd been missing. It wasn't me, apparently. It all became agonizingly clear. Clara, with her infectious energy and her effortless charm, had become more than just a colleague. She'd become an obsession. And Ben, my dependable, loving Ben, had been swept away by it. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, not at first. I felt numb, as if watching a scene unfold on a distant stage. The woman I had admired, whose company I had enjoyed, had become the architect of my heartbreak. And the man I loved, the one I built my life around, had willingly walked into the trap. I see now that I knew, deep down, from the moment I met her, that she had the power to shake things up. It wasn't an overt malice on her part, perhaps, but a force of nature. I'd been so blinded by her brightness, I hadn't seen the darkness that could lurk in the shadows of such blinding light. And now, here I was, left in those very shadows, picking up the shattered pieces of my life, wondering how I could have ever been so oblivious. The sunshine had become a storm, and I was left to face the wreckage alone.
Confession 2. Ita for imploding on my mom and finally trauma dumping on her. So I come from an Indian family and we live with our parents for majority of our life. I have never had the best relationship with my mother since childhood, and honestly I have always resented her a bit. I used to write "I hate my mom" on my bedroom walls when I was little. My mother was always strict towards me and used to hit me a lot when I was a child, and it slowed down as I grew up, but she very recently slapped me, I'm 26 now, a few months ago because of a fight we had. This is considered okay in brown families, and that's what I heard instead of apologies. She has cared for me immensely, but she has the habit of saying the most outrageous mentally abusive things as soon as things don't go her way. My brother and father are rather understanding of her mannerisms and let it go. Life would have been so much easier if I were the same way. I unfortunately remember things from the distant past and still can't forgive her for a few things. Now I am moving abroad and I could finally have some space to forgive and forget. Lately, my mother and I are both trying our best to be pally and loving towards each other as I'm moving. Last week, she along with my father called me to talk. They said I don't talk to them often and I felt bad honestly. As we were talking, my father was on his phone the entire time, not paying heed to what I was saying, and as soon as I finished, he asked about my plans to get married. He said that my grandparents are getting old and they would like to see at least my engagement, Roka, before they go. I replied politely that I had no plans of getting engaged as I want to settle down first and then think about it. Now they know this already. I have made it clear several times that I don't intend on getting married anytime soon, but they have not stopped pursuing me for it. My mother especially has been constantly manipulating me with the help of my father and the family to get married. After I declined on getting engaged, my mother proceeds to say, "Why would you care if your grandparents die as long as you are getting your way?" And that broke me. It was very close to my grandfather, and lately I have not been able to spend more time with him due to work. My mother didn't realize what she said and I had to ignore it at the moment so that I don't cry, and I wrapped up the conversation. This hasn't left my mind since it happened. Today, I was having a conversation with her and I mentioned that I didn't like what she said to me. In the past, whenever I have tried to communicate my feelings to her, I am often shunned with "you'll realize it when you become a mother" or empty promises to be better. I made a deal with myself to not engage or communicate with her because of this, but today I broke down. I trauma dumped about how she has hit me multiple times even as an adult, how her words affect me, and she says the most vile shit when she is upset. I might have said a lot for her to process, and my brother supported me. I also in the past asked her to not invite a relative to gatherings because he used to text me uncomfortable things at night when I was in school and he was doing a job, to which she replied, "Oh, he's married now, he won't notice you, and I don't want to sour my relationship with his family." I mentioned all of this and more. I was a bit harsh tbh. She broke down and left the room crying, saying she doesn't want anything to do with me and I'll have a difficult life ahead because of my attitude. I feel like I did say a lot and feel like the I want to hug her and say sorry, but I don't think I was wrong. Ita? Confession 3. I caught my ex lying and it changed me forever. This is something that happened a couple of years ago, and honestly, I'm glad I've moved past it now. I just wanted to share because looking back, it feels like a wild ride that shaped who I am today. I was with this girl for 4 years in total. The first 3 years were great, fun, love, and everything in between. Then, in the 3rd year, we hit a snag. She caught me liking another girl's post on Instagram. To her, that was breaking a boundary we'd set, though it was never a big deal to me. She said I disrespected her, and we broke up over it. Fine. We stayed apart for about a year. Eventually, we reconnected. We ran into each other where we first met, at university. Things felt familiar, so we decided to stay friends. But you know how that goes. The attraction was still there, and we got back together for almost a year. At first, everything seemed fine. She got a job, and I was still studying to become a software engineer. We set the same boundaries as before, honesty about anything and everything. But one day, I went through her phone for an unrelated reason and stumbled across texts from her and a guy from work. He was her manager, and the texts were flirty, lovely emojis, playful back and forth. She hadn't told me about him, which pissed me off. When I confronted her, she tried brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal. She said she didn't mean to hide it. But to me, hiding it at all was the problem. I couldn't let it go. I told her to get out of my car, and we went home separately. For days, things were cold between us. We tried to work things out, but my trust in her was shot. I kept replaying everything in my head and developed trust issues. A few weeks later, I decided to do something to shake off the funk. I shaved my hair, a symbolic new me move, and thought, why not surprise her at work? She had this routine where she'd text me when she got off work, when she was in a cab, and when she got home. I followed the same system because, at the time, we were happy with it. But when I showed up to surprise her, I saw her leaving work with some guy. They were walking close, touching even. She hadn't mentioned him, of course. I called her and asked where she was. She said she was heading to the cabs. I asked if she was alone, and she lied again, saying yes. Here's where it gets worse. She went in the opposite direction of the cabs with the guy. I was already upset, but I called her again and asked where she was. She eventually said, "Oh, you're here in it," and she came over to where I was parked. She refused to talk in the car and started flipping things on me, saying I lied to her about being at home when I was really at her workplace. At that point, I wasn't angry, I just got disappointed when she compared me being at her workplace to her lying about going God knows where with that guy, and I told her to F*** off and left. She went to the cabs and headed home, and I did the same. That was the breaking point for me. I'm 24 now, and I've grown a lot since then. I have no idea what she's up to, and honestly, I couldn't care less. That experience drained me of emotion, but it also taught me something important: I don't need someone who disrespects me or lies to my face. Nowadays, I'm cold-hearted, but not in a bitter way. I just don't let anyone get close enough to mess with my peace. And for that, I'm glad.